Imagine a child cast into the endless void, thrown away like nothing, drifting between the stars where no human should survive. Her fate should have been sealed. But the universe has a strange memory, and sometimes it refuses to forget. Against all odds, she was carried across the cosmic river, preserved and delivered into human hands. What grew from that tragedy wasn't just survival, it was legend. This is the story of a starborn child, abandoned by ambition but raised by humanity into something far greater. A symbol the galaxy could never erase. Before we dive deeper, if you love stories where humanity proves its worth against the impossible, where we rise, endure, and inspire, then hit that like button. Subscribe to join our growing community of HFY legends, and don't forget to share this video with a friend who enjoys powerful storytelling. Now, settle in, because this story will take us from betrayal and survival to forgiveness written among the stars. There are stories that begin with light, new stars igniting, civilizations rising. And then there are stories that begin with shadows. This one begins in the shadow of ambition. On the human colony of Akenzi 9, a frontier world carved out of alien wilderness, a woman named Amanda Coro believed she was destined for more. She had beauty sharp enough to turn heads and pride heavy enough to crush reason. She wanted freedom from her humble family, from the rules that told her who she should be. And when an alien warlord noticed her, she thought fate had finally opened its hand. His name was Lord Oduma of the Jar Dominion. His empire stretched across systems, his palaces floated among the stars, and his word could silence entire fleets. Yet for all his wealth and power, he carried a wound. No son to inherit his throne. He had daughters, many of them, but no male heir. Among his kind, that was weakness. A dynasty without an heir was dust waiting for the wind. When Amanda entered his orbit, Oduma believed he had found his answer. She was human, strange, unpredictable, but beautiful in a way his people admired. He promised her riches beyond measure, protection, status, everything she thought she wanted. And Amanda, intoxicated by the chance to rise above the dust of her colony, promised him something greater, a son. Every day Oduma touched her swelling belly, whispering, "My heir grows strong." Every day Amanda stood before her mirror, whispering, "I must win." But the universe has no obligation to fulfill the promises of pride. The night of birth came. The air was tense, the palace hushed, Oduma pacing like a caged predator. When the child emerged, the silence was cut only by a small, fragile cry, a sound softer than starlight. A daughter. Amanda's smile cracked, her breath caught. A girl. To her, this wasn't life, it was failure. She had sworn a son, a prince, a dynasty reborn. Instead, she cradled what she saw as weakness. The warlord's trust, the other wives' envy, her entire future. She believed it would all collapse. And so, as the palace slept, Amanda crept into the night. The child was wrapped in thin cloth, eyes blinking at the strange, cold world. Beyond the palace walls stretched the eternal river, a shimmering cosmic anomaly, part wormhole, part living current, that drifted through this sector like a ribbon of liquid night. Ancient stories said the river remembered. It carried secrets. It carried judgment. Amanda stood at the edge, her heart pounding. The infant whimpered, a fragile sound that asked nothing but to live. Amanda whispered instead, "I cannot raise you. A daughter is useless. You will bring only shame." And with a final trembling breath, she cast her own child into the void.
For a moment, silence. Then the cloth hit the river, and instead of swallowing the baby whole, the current cradled her. The stars reflected on its surface as if watching. The river didn't drag her under. It carried her, drifting, as though refusing to let this life vanish. Amanda returned to her chambers, her face painted with tears she did not feel. When Oduma asked, "Was it a boy?" she whispered a lie. "Yes, but he died at birth." The warlord believed her. He held her, whispering that they would try again. Amanda rested her head against his chest, but deep inside, She felt the weight of what she had done. What she didn't know was that the river was awake. The eternal river drifted silently through the galaxy, carrying the small child across impossible distances. Alien stars rose and fell. Dead worlds glimmered beneath her, darkened fleets rusted in its shadow, yet still the current flowed. The baby cried softly at times, then slept as if the void itself was a cradle. Hours became days, days became weeks. And then, far across the stars, the river delivered her to the barren orbit of a forgotten colony, Faju 3. On that colony lived Johnny and Binta On, a couple who had prayed for a child for over 20 years. Their home was quiet, their nights haunted by silence. Every attempt, every treatment, every plea to doctors and priests, nothing had ever given them hope. Yet that night, when they stood outside their modest dome beneath the endless stars, they heard it. A cry, not the cry of an animal, not the creak of metal. A human cry, faint but unmistakable. Their hearts raced as they followed the sound to the landing bays, where the river's current had deposited a damaged stasis pod, tangled in scrap and debris. Inside, wrapped in cloth and glowing softly beneath starlight, was a baby. Binta gasped, tears spilling instantly. "Johnny, she's beautiful." The baby blinked at her, quiet now, as though recognizing safety. Johnny's hands trembled as he touched the child's cheek. After all these years, the stars answered us. They carried her inside, warmed her, fed her, and gave her a name, Osinachi, gift of the stars. The eternal river drifted away, silent once more, but it had done its part. And somewhere far away, in the luxury of Oduma's palace, Amanda believed she had erased a shame. What she could not imagine was that the universe had preserved her daughter, wrapped her in humanity's love, and set her on a path that would outshine empires, because a void remembers. And humanity does not waste its gifts. The child should have been forgotten, a secret cast into the dark, lost in currents no one dared to trace. But the void is not so careless. The child had been carried into the arms of humanity, and under their care, her destiny began to burn brighter than any star. Johnny and Binton had long believed they were cursed. 2 decades of prayers, fasting, sacrifices, nothing. The silence in their home was a wound that never closed. Yet from that silence came the cry that would heal them. When they lifted the child from the stasis pod, when her small fingers gripped theirs, they knew their lives had been rewritten. She was not just any child. She was their child. They named her Osinachi, which in the old Earth tongue meant gift of the stars. The name carried both gratitude and reverence, for they knew the universe itself had placed her in their hands. From the first day, Osinachi was different. Her laugh, light as starlight, filled a small home that had once been as silent as a tomb. Her presence was a balm. Neighbors who visited swore the air felt warmer around her. Even the crops near the On's homestead seemed to grow greener, richer, as though the soil itself leaned toward her light. But Osinachi was not spoiled. She grew with humility, always eager to help. She fetched water, cleaned the habitat, and greeted everyone with a soft respect rare in children. At dawn, she whispered prayers, not to gods, but to the universe, asking only, "Use me to help people." In the colony of Faju 3, word spread quickly. They called her the child with mercy in her hands. At the clinic dome, where underfunded medics struggled to treat colonists, Osinachi would sit quietly, soothing the sick, cleaning wounds, singing softly to crying children. People swore her touch eased their pain, though she had no training. Old women blessed her when she passed. Farmers claimed their fields thrived near her presence, and even the most hardened miners softened when she smiled. She grew into a beacon, not of wealth or power, but of kindness, and in a galaxy where cruelty often outweighed compassion, that made her extraordinary. But Osinachi never knew her true beginning. To her, Johnny and Binta were her parents, and their love was enough. She never questioned where she had come from, never guessed that the river had carried her from betrayal to belonging. The story of her abandonment was buried far away, in another world, where the woman who cast her aside still believed her secret safe. Yet the universe does not keep secrets forever. On Ikenzi 9, Lord Oduma's empire began to fracture. Rivals circled like predators. His health declined, and his wealth bled away. His palace, once filled with music and servants, grew quiet. And Amanda, the proud woman who had thought herself victorious, began to taste the bitterness of isolation. Her beauty, once her weapon, dulled with age. Her daughters left for distant marriages, sending only occasional messages. And at night, Amanda began to hear it, the soft cry of a baby echoing through her chambers, a cry she could not escape. She told herself it was madness, but the river does not forget. Back on Fiju 3, Osinachi's light only grew brighter. By her teenage years, she was at the center of the community, trusted, loved, celebrated. When the colony governor announced her acceptance into a prestigious medical program on the core worlds, the entire settlement erupted in joy. They threw a festival, drums and lights filling the sky, banners declaring her name. Johnny and Binta wept as they watched her stand in the square, her white ceremonial robes glowing beneath the colony lights. Around her ankle, she wore a small charm bracelet, one that had been found with her, tied long ago with red thread and tiny beads. She never knew its origin, only that it felt like part of her. As she danced, the bracelet jingled softly, and far away, across broken star lanes, a woman named Amanda would soon see it, and realize that the past she tried to bury had been written into the future. For now, though, Osinachi only smiled. She had no idea that she was more than a gifted child. She had no idea that she was living proof of humanity's greatest truth, that even when cast into the void, even when betrayed, even when every star seemed indifferent, human love could take the broken and raise it into legend. The gift of the stars was ready to step into her destiny. But destiny never comes without shadows, because soon the betrayer would return. The galaxy is a hard place for humanity. Caught between ancient empires and merciless economies, humans were often the scavengers, the colonists scratching life from dust, the soldiers hired to fight wars that weren't theirs. But in the cracks of that struggle, something else grew, something no alien dynasty could replicate. Compassion, resilience, hope. Osinachi was its embodiment. By the time she reached adulthood, her reputation had already spread beyond Fiju 3. She wasn't a warrior or a leader of fleets. She was something rarer, a healer who made people believe again. Neighbors told stories of how crops thrived in her presence, how fevers broke when she touched a child's forehead, how disputes calmed when she spoke gently. The miners swore the endless dark of the asteroid fields felt less suffocating when they knew she was waiting back home. Even the most cynical merchants admitted there was something in her eyes that made you want to be better than you were. Osinachi never claimed power. She simply gave herself to others, and that, in a galaxy built on conquest, was power. Her parents, Johnny and Binta, watched with pride. They had lived through decades of silence, despair, and ridicule, only to be rewarded with a daughter whose very existence was proof that the universe still held kindness. Binta would whisper at night, "The stars gave us more than a child. They gave us light." But Osinachi never knew her origin. She wore the charm bracelet on her ankle, the one with faded red thread and old beads, never questioning where it came from. To her, it was just a keepsake, a lucky piece she had worn since childhood. She had no idea it was a thread tying her back to betrayal, a memory the universe had refused to erase. And far away, the past was stirring. On Ikenzi 9, Amanda's empire had crumbled into dust. Lord Oduma was dead, his dominion carved apart by rivals, his palaces emptied, his fleet stripped. Amanda was left in the shell of luxury, her beauty fading, her children scattered across distant worlds. She was alone, and with the loneliness came something worse. A sickness. Her skin withered, her lips cracked, her breath turned shallow. Doctors could not explain it. Medics from alien worlds, herbalists from old Earth traditions, even machines designed to scan cell by cell, all failed. They gave her injections, fed her nanomedicines, chanted prayers. Nothing worked. At night, she would wake to the sound of a baby crying. No child was in her house, yet the wail would echo through the corridors, pulling her back to a night long ago by the eternal river. She pressed her hands to her ears, screaming, but the cry never faded. The river had not forgotten. And one night, a figure came to her door, a woman cloaked in white, her eyes sharp, her voice cold as starlight. She said only, "What you cast away lives, only she can save you. Without her blessing, you will die." Amanda collapsed, trembling. The figure was gone, but the word stayed. And for the first time in her life, Amanda felt true fear, not of poverty, not of shame, but of death. So she began her search. Amanda left the ruins of a palace with nothing but rags and a small bag. Inside it, wrapped carefully, was a bracelet, the same one she had tied around her newborn's ankle the night she cast her into the void. It was her only proof, her only hope. She crossed worlds, knocking on doors, asking strangers if they knew a girl touched by the stars. Some spat at her, called her a beggar. Others slammed doors in her face. She fainted from hunger, begged for water, endured storms, and walked on swollen feet. Once a woman admired, now she was just another wanderer. And through it all, the cry never left her ears. Meanwhile, Osinachi's star was rising. She had been accepted into a prestigious medical program on the core worlds, a chance to turn her compassion into skill, her gift into a force that could heal thousands. The colony of Faju 3 celebrated like it was their own child chosen. Drums thundered, lights filled the night sky, and people called her Child of Light. She danced in the square, her white gown gleaming. Around her ankle, the charm bracelet jingled, faint but clear. And at the edge of the crowd, a woman stumbled in, broken, dust-covered, her eyes wide with shock. Amanda. Her gaze locked on the bracelet, and her knees buckled. It was impossible. And yet, it was real. The daughter she had thrown away, the life she had condemned, was alive. Not just alive, but celebrated, loved, radiant. Amanda fell to the ground, crawling through the dust, reaching out. Her voice cracked, trembling. My child, my daughter, please, I am dying. The music stopped. The drums fell silent. The crowd froze. And Osinachi turned. Her smile faded as her eyes met the broken woman's. She didn't know her, and yet, in her chest, something stayed, a weight she couldn't name, an ache she didn't understand. The past had found her. The betrayer had returned. And the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The festival square of Faju 3 was alive with music, joy, and light, until Amanda fell into the dust. Her body was frail, wrapped in rags, her lips cracked, her breath heavy. Once she had been adorned in jewels, carried by servants, and admired by all. Now she crawled, reaching out with shaking hands, her voice breaking like old wood in fire. My child, my daughter, please, I am dying. The crowd gasped. Mothers shielded their children. Men pulled back as though from a ghost. Nobody knew her face, but the weight of her words pressed down on them all. Osinachi froze where she stood. She had no memory of this woman. To her, Johnny and Binta were her only parents. Yet something in the way the stranger's voice cracked, the desperate longing in her eyes, cut deeper than reason. Behind Osinachi, Johnny and Binta stepped forward. Their faces were calm but heavy with the truth they had carried silently for years. Binta's hand trembled slightly as she touched her husband's arm. This was the moment they had always feared, the day the past would come walking out of the shadows. Amanda lifted a hand, revealing something clutched in her palm. A bracelet. Old, frayed, but unmistakable. Red thread, tiny beads. The same one jingling softly around Osinachi's ankle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Amanda's tears streaked her dirt-covered cheeks. You were the one, she whispered. The river carried you. You lived. The gods, no, the stars, preserved you. And I, her voice broke. I threw you away. The crowd erupted. Shouts of disbelief, fury, curses spat like fire. Women covered their mouths in horror. A man shouted, Monster, she abandoned her own blood. Another cried, Cast her out. But Amanda didn't flinch. She pressed her forehead into the dirt, weeping. Please, I am cursed. I hear your cry every night. My body rots. They told me only your blessing can save me. Without it, I will die. The square fell silent again, as if the very wind was waiting. Osinachi's chest rose and fell quickly. Her mind swirled. This broken stranger had just confessed the unthinkable, that she had tried to end her life, had abandoned her to the void. And yet here she was, begging for salvation. Behind her, Binta whispered softly, Daughter, this choice is yours. Johnny nodded, his voice low. Only you can answer her. The crowd murmured. Some shouted for rejection. Others demanded justice. But Osinachi stepped forward, her feet trembling, her bracelet jingling with each movement. She stood before Amanda, looking down at the woman who had cast her away. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "You tried to end me." Amanda raised her head slowly. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking. "Yes, I did." The words cut the crowd like a blade. Osinachi's eyes filled with tears. "But the stars preserved me. Humanity raised me." Her voice grew stronger, carrying across the square. "And now you ask me for life after you gave me none." Amanda's sobs shook her thin frame. "Please, I have nothing left. I have no strength. Only you. Forgive me, or I will perish." The air grew heavy. Even the drums, abandoned by their players, seemed to wait. Children stayed with wide eyes. Old women whispered prayers. Humanity itself seemed to lean forward, watching what this girl of light would choose. Osinachi bent down, her hands trembling, her face wet with tears. She placed her palm gently on Amanda's head. Her voice broke, but it was steady enough to carry. "I forgive you." The crowd gasped again, not with outrage, but with awe. "Let the stars hear it. Let the void witness it. I forgive you." Amanda collapsed fully into the date, sobbing, clinging to the hem of her daughter's robe. Her body, once frail and decayed, began to ease. Her breathing steadied. The darkness in her skin lightened. She felt warmth return to her bones. But Osinachi did not smile. She pulled her hand away, her eyes sharp with sorrow. "Your peace is not mine to give alone. The river remembers. The universe saw. Ask it if it forgives you." Amanda froze, her tears falling harder, for she knew the river never forgot. Osinachi turned away, walking back toward Johnny and Binta. She leaned into her mother's embrace, her shoulders shaking. She had given mercy, but not reconciliation. Forgiveness was not the same as forgetting. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Some wept, some whispered. A few even fell to their knees, realizing they had just witnessed something greater than vengeance, humanity's greatest strength, laid bare in the dust of a colony square. The betrayer had returned, and instead of destruction, she had found something far more terrifying: mercy. The colony square remained frozen, as though time itself refused to move. Dust swirled in the air, banners drooped in silence, and every eye lingered on two women, one broken in the date, the other radiant in white. Amanda wept, her body shaking, her hands clawing at the ground. For the first time in her life, her beauty, her pride, her schemes, none of it mattered. She had been stripped to the bone, reduced to nothing but desperation. And in front of her stood the living proof of her crime. The daughter she had abandoned, the child she had deemed worthless. Now a beacon, a healer, a legend in the making. Osinachi's hand still tingled where it had touched her mother's head. She had spoken the words, "I forgive you." And yet her chest was heavy, her throat tight. Forgiveness did not erase memory. It did not rewrite the pain of what had been done. She turned her gaze to the horizon where the eternal river shimmered faintly in the distance. It was more than a current of space. It was memory, judgment, witness, and it had carried her where no human hand could. It had preserved her when her own mother cast her away. Her voice, steady but soft, rose above the silence. "You asked for life. I gave you forgiveness. But you must understand, your peace is not mine to give alone. The river remembers. The universe remembers. Ask it if it forgives you." The words fell heavy as stone. Amanda collapsed forward, her forehead pressing into the date. She wept not just for her sickness, not just for her fear of death, but for the unbearable truth that the universe itself had been a witness. Her betrayal was etched in starlight, unerasable. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some whispered that Osinachi had shown weakness. Others wept openly, moved by her mercy. A few even dropped to their knees, realizing they had witnessed something greater than justice. They had seen the heart of humanity laid bare. For what alien empire would show such mercy? What ancient dynasty would forgive a crime so personal, so unforgivable? Only humans. Johnny and Binta stepped forward. Their faces were streaked with tears, their hands trembling. They had raised this child, loved her as their own, and now they watched her stand taller than kings. Johnny whispered, "She is more than ours now. She belongs to the stars." Benton nodded, her voice breaking. "She is the legend we prayed for." The people of Faju 3 erupted, not with music, but with chants. "Starborn! Starborn! Starborn!" The name spread like wildfire, passing from mouth to mouth, echoing beyond the square, across the colony, and into the star lanes. Osinachi, once a child cast into the void, was now the Starborn child. Amanda lay trembling, clutching her chest as warmth returned slowly to her frail body. She had been spared, but as she raised a tear-streaked face to look at her daughter, she saw no embrace waiting, no reunion, only a boundary she could never cross. Osinachi had given forgiveness, but not her heart, because some wounds belonged only to the stars to heal. That night, the eternal river shimmered brighter than ever. Colonists swore they heard it whispering, as if carrying Osinachi's name across light years. Traders carried the story to other colonies. Soldiers repeated it in the barracks. Even alien worlds began to murmur the human girl who had been cast away and yet became legend, not through conquest, not through fleets or armies, but through compassion. That was humanity's weapon. That was what made them feared, envied, and admired. Because where others saw weakness, humans forged strength. Where others chose vengeance, humans chose mercy. And mercy, in the hands of humanity, was more terrifying than war. Years later, when Osinachi graduated as a healer, thousands gathered from across the galaxy to hear her speak. She stood tall, her charm bracelet jingling softly around her ankle, a relic of betrayal turned into a symbol of survival. Her voice carried across the assembly hall, across broadcasts, across hearts. The stars preserved me. Humanity raised me. And I stand here today not because of one woman's cruelty, but because love was stronger. If you doubt the worth of our species, remember this. When cast into the void, we do not vanish. We rise. We endure. We forgive. That is what it means to be human. The hall shook with thunderous applause, not just from humans, but from aliens who had never seen such resilience wrapped in mercy. And so the legend of the Starborn child became more than a story. It became a banner carried by humanity, a tale whispered in trenches, sung in colonies, told in hushed or across empires. A reminder that when the universe itself tries to bury them, humans do not simply survive. They become legends, and that, my friends, is the legend of the Starborn child, cast into the void, yet raised by humanity into something greater than empires. A story that reminds us that our strength doesn't just come from ships or weapons, but from compassion that refuses to die. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves a good HFY tale. Until next time, remember, in the darkest corners of the galaxy, it is humanity's light that burns brightest.